All right, so now we're live. So first I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Minu and I'll be moderating the panel today. We have 4 amazing women here with us, and I'd like to thank them all for being here as well as all the attendees. So without further ado, I would like to hand it off to them for introductions. So we'll start with Angie.
Hi, I'm Angie Ranninger, and I'm really happy to be here today. I have been in this industry or in computer science for, I guess it's getting close to 30 years if you count the time in school. So I went to Williams College and I majored in computer science. And then I went for my PhD to UC Berkeley. And then I ended up at the National Security Agency for about 18 years. And then now I'm at Morgan Stanley, where I work on the cyber analytics team. And we develop new analytics to help protect Morgan Stanley. So very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Claire?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire. Also super excited to be here. I actually helped run the URTC conference a few years back. So very excited to be on the other side of things. I'm originally from Southern California. I'm currently in Cambridge. So I'm a master's student right now at MIT. So kind of like on the cusp of my career. I graduated last spring with my bachelor's in computer science. Right now I'm doing research in compilers, specifically a programming language specific to graph applications. And I guess in the past, I've done a few internships at Google, some internships at smaller companies like called Rev, which is a startup in San Francisco, and Microsoft as well. So a few different experiences there, but am now kind of just on the beginning of my career, though.
Thank you so much. Next, Cassandra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Cassandra Lewis. I'm currently a product leader for communications at OpenTable. I graduated from University of Maryland College Park with a degree in computer science, and have worked on everything from Office on the iPad to Xbox One at Microsoft to Amazon Kindle and Prime Video. So very happy to be here as well.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Roshni.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Roshni. I am a software engineer at Waymo, the Google self-driving car project. I work on the perception team, so using machine learning and computer vision to better understand the world around us. Specifically, I work on figuring out the stuff that we can drive through, so things like vehicle exhaust and rain and fog, and figuring out that it's okay to keep going through those things. Before that, I did a PhD at Stanford where I was looking at pictures of neurons and understanding, using computer vision to better understand the nervous system. I used to be a hardware engineer applying video processing algorithms and FPGAs. So I've been kind of doing all sorts of, I've been doing the same like video computer vision stuff, but in all sorts of applications. I was at MIT for undergrad and MEng a long time ago. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So without further ado, we're going to get into the question portion. Our first question is, how did you get into your industry and why do you stay?
I can take it first. Collision. All right, I'll take a first stab. So I fell in love with computer programming as a kid, and I really loved that feeling of being able to make something and invent something and have it work and see how it was completed and show other people. And so that's what kept me in computer science. And I accidentally got into cybersecurity just by being at the National Security Agency. And while I was there, I got the chance to do something new every couple of years. So I felt like I was always learning and always having that excitement of understanding something new, even in jobs where I wasn't programming. So that was something that was great to me. And the industry's been changing so fast. There's so much going on. I find that really exhilarating, just picking up new skills and working with other people who like to do that.
Yeah, and I think similar for me as well. I was the child that was constantly playing on my mom's computer, even though she probably didn't want me messing around on it at the time. And I've always been fascinated by technology. And I think one of my goals in life has always been to use technology and leverage that to make people's lives better. And I stay because continually I find that I'm able to do that. So, and like Angela said, it's rapidly evolving. There's always new things to learn. It's always very exciting. And, you know, the thing you thought that you knew and fully understood yesterday has completely changed tomorrow. And then you're kind of chasing down that knowledge as well. So it's always a lot of fun.
I think I'm pretty similar to like my fellow panelists. I've always like known from a very young age that I wanted to build stuff. I thought originally that I might want to go into mechanical engineering, but something, so I actually did like a research job in my freshman year at MIT, and that really influenced me to go and study actually computer science because I enjoyed it that much. And I think what's kept me in it for at least the past 4 years is just like the opportunity to learn so many different things, from like learning about machine learning to doing like systems work and learning about like operating system compilers, and just it seems like it's endless. So
yeah, I've also always liked math and science, and I really like building things and building them to solve problems. And I think what the problems that I've worked on or that I've gravitated towards have largely been things that feel very big, like very grand. So like working on, when I was in grad school, we were looking at neurons to better understand Parkinson's and figure out how to help people who have diseases like Parkinson's or ALS. And so that felt like really meaningful, and being able to use the math that I love doing to do something meaningful. And with self-driving cars, like that's going to change everything. It's going to change how we live, how we work, how we build our cities. And so that's a super exciting project to be working on also. And so just, I think being able to apply the technical skills that I like to problems that are really going to make a difference to people is pretty exciting.
Awesome. So our second question for today is, what are the challenges that you as a woman face in your field?
So I think I can maybe speak on that a little bit. I think one thing that I do find is there's sometimes that unconscious bias of, you know, are women really that technical? And you do sometimes, especially with the newer team, feel like you come in and have to prove yourself a bit. And so I think that that's kind of one of the challenges that we face. But I can say I've seen that become less and less of a problem, which is very encouraging.
I think for me, I didn't even realize what the challenges were until I started working. So when I was in grad school, I worked in a biology lab, which was half women or more than half women. And it was amazing. Like everyone was just on a certain wavelength that I had never experienced with my male colleagues. And not that they were ever, you know, purposely exclusionary, but I think it was just really nice to be able to just kind of completely be myself and not feel like I needed to fit in with the boys club. And so I think that's something that ends up being challenging, and it's just, it can be a little exhausting and draining sometimes, I think, to have to always be trying to fit in. And you get used to it, and as more and more women join the field, it's less of an issue also.
I think for me, I feel like I've been pretty lucky that there haven't been any horrible, like really bad obstacles. But I do think that one of the things that I have experienced, like especially like right now in my MN, for example, like there aren't a lot of women like in my group right now, or in my, like, I guess in tech broadly, it's still kind of like a problem as well. And even from like the perspective of someone who's like trying to figure out like where to go for a full-time job, trying to like always ask like, you know, is this going to kind of be a place where, you know, there is a place for me? Will I be able to like see people like me in the workplace? And then trying to like figure that out for like all of these different companies or different like future places that I could be has been a little bit challenging.
I think I see some subtle biases around when people are chosen for special projects or extra duties. So when there's a job that's posted and people apply for it, I think people are more careful when they choose. But when there's something that just comes up, managers will tend to have a tendency to slot women into more nurturing projects and men into more commanding projects. And because they're not advertised, you don't get the chance to put yourself forward. And by the time you hear about it, it can be too late. So I think having a lot of discussions with your supervisor and talking about your goals, and also I sometimes have to push myself to go after those projects rather than fit into something that's a little more comfortable and easy for me. So I find once people are aware of those biases and think about them, it's easier to overcome it.
Angie, do you think that that became more noticeable when you became a mom, or was that always the case?
That's a good question. I think I noticed when I was younger that when it came to like office social activities, a lot of times it was women who would go and buy the birthday cake or do those sorts of things. But as I get into maybe higher in management, it becomes that tendency plays out in different ways.
Awesome thoughts. So our next question is, I guess, particularly relevant to me as well. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? If so, how did you face or overcome it?
I would say yes, yes, yes. And I think that specifically earlier on in my career, wanting to speak up in large meetings, but also feeling like you have zero experience and you're almost kind of happy to be there. And so I think that becomes really uncomfortable because, you have these people that have been doing this for a long time and, are my opinions and thoughts valuable? And so I think overcoming that, I kind of just had to remind myself, I'm here to present fresh thinking and new ideas. And so with experience sometimes comes thinking along a single route and path. And you want that person to come in and kind of, as they say, disrupt things. And I remember a quote I saw, it was a meme actually, it was really funny to me, but I still kind of even encourage my team and tell them this, like, you may think you have a really terrible idea, but just remember that somebody once sat in a conference room and pitched a movie idea about a tornado full of sharks. So if they can do that, there's no idea that you're going to have. And they're on like movie number 5. So like whatever you think, it's okay.
Or a video game about a plumber and his brother.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Yeah, imposter syndrome has definitely been an issue for me. And for me, I definitely find when I come to a new job where I don't know anyone, no matter how much my previous manager cried when I left, I just have that crisis of confidence. Like, did they really choose me correctly? And, can I really do this? And it's painful because you spend so much time worrying people are going to discover that I don't know about X issue, that you lose the chance to ask people about that issue. And people love talking about what they know. So just getting over that hump to where you can ask people, because people generally really want to help. So I find for me, I give myself little pep talks. And then I try to spend a little time and get confident on 1 or 2 issues that I'm really worried about, like, some technical protocol or something. And then once I've got that basis of confidence that sort of convinced me that I can do it, then I feel comfortable going and asking people about all the other 99 issues that I need to learn about.
I feel like for me, I still haven't acknowledged that I have imposter syndrome. And then but then I still feel disappointed when things don't quite work out the way I want them to. And then I just had a good sentence for how to explain this, and now I'm kind of losing it. But I think I don't realize that I feel that way, but I do, if that makes sense. And I think basically, yeah, I'm still figuring it out. And I think it's not necessarily easy to realize that it's imposter syndrome that's the problem, or if it's, I find very specific things to blame and not just a general mindset. And I think that's maybe not the most productive.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I definitely have had, I feel I have definitely felt imposter syndrome very often. Just coming out of college, I think imposter syndrome shows up, even like when you take your first intro CS class and someone comes in with like, they've coded since they were 10 and you've coded since like a month ago. I think one of the biggest things, I think one of the biggest things that, helped me through those times and then the times, to follow, is just, I think like something that Angie said was really good was like getting over that hurdle to go and ask for help has been really good for me. Like, I feel like I've asked like some questions that I was like really scared to ask, and then the other person says, "Oh, that's a really great question," and that makes me feel so good inside.
Awesome. Thank you. So I guess this leads into what was your biggest success and your biggest learning opportunity?
This is a tough one. I think sometimes it's hard to look back, at least for me, it's hard to look back and say that was my biggest success. So I think for me, my biggest success is just raising my 3 kids and keeping a strong marriage with my husband. That's important to me. But looking back at my professional career, I think what I'm most proud of is actually, I think back to individual people that I've helped get a new job or move up in their career and get to the next level. That's really rewarding. And I know that there were so many people who helped me along the way, giving pep talks or telling me where to go next, or just, helping me look at opportunities that I didn't identify for myself. That's really rewarding to be able to pay that back to the next generation for me. And I think my biggest learning opportunity is also not very technical. It's about working with other people. And as someone who loves technology, there's sometimes a temptation to just work alone and get in the flow, and you just like analyzing data, writing code. It's so much fun. But, learning how to manage up and present unpleasant truths to management is kind of something that is just constantly an area where I work to improve. And getting change to happen at an organizational level is something that's really important. And something that's really hard. So there's always ways to improve there.
Yeah, totally.
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think my biggest learning is very similar. I'm struggling with that right now, actually, at work, where I've been working on a project that I've been working on by myself for a long time. And I've always been thinking of it as, what can I do? But I obviously only have so many hours in a day. And I just had a talk with my manager where she was like, well, you just need to convince me that we need more people to work on it. And I hadn't even really realized, like, oh, hey, I just need to tell her. She doesn't even realize. And I think that managing up is really, I think that will be really useful once I figure it out. And I think my biggest success is yet to come, which is going to be not having to teach my kids to drive, because we can drive. I have about 15 years to make that happen. So fingers crossed.
That's awesome. I think for me, one of my biggest successes, I actually worked on the Office on the iPad team, on the launch team for that. And it was one of those situations where I was, kind of fresh and excited and joined the team, and there were 3 PMs and a product manager. And within about 2 months, it was just me. It was like attrition happened. And it took a while to hire new people. And so it was me kind of holding multiple hats and trying to hold down the fort and all of that. And I think the success there was realizing that you don't have to do 100% of everything. You just have to get it done. And so as product managers, we write specs, and I kind of sat down with my team and said, hey guys, it's just me. So some of our specs are going to be hallway conversations, and some are going to be written documents, and some are going to be a post-it. Like, we're going to just kind of work through this and make it happen. And we pulled it off. And I think that was like a huge success. The biggest learning is probably it's feedback I got from a manager a long time ago that, change is always a good thing, but you have to know how to implement that. And it's the quote, don't try to boil the ocean. You want to kind of start with a cup of water. It's much easier. And so, as Gandhi said, you want to be the change, as opposed to, everybody, we need to take the Titanic and shift it across. Like, maybe we just kind of start a little bit small and just tell them there's an iceberg out there. So I think that's one of the biggest learnings that I've had.
I think for me, obviously, like, still really early in my career, so I surely do hope my biggest success is to come. But I think my largest success so far is this kind of project that a few of my friends and I had started up, which was during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was basically like this web app, like nonprofit thing to like connect communities to individuals in their area. And so I think that was a big success, not just from like a technical perspective for me, but also in terms of getting to work with other people who didn't have like a computer science background, who had like different ideas. working with, like partners in the community to like assess needs. And a lot of the things outside of like the technical expertise you might get in like your college classes, and kind of seeing that come together in something, that can actually like bring a change like to your local community. I think on the same vein, like that experience has also been like my greatest learning opportunity. I think this was a new experience for like everyone on the team, and so we went through a lot of obstacles. Some of them required a lot of pivoting and a lot of very honest conversations that weren't always easy to have. But I think in that experience, like I think we all got to learn a lot about how to like manage an organization, and I think we grew even as like leaders from it.
Awesome. Our next question is, what is one piece of practical advice that you would give to somebody starting out in tech?
So I'd probably say ask for help. It's the best and hardest thing, because you kind of go back to imposter syndrome. Like, if I ask you for help on this thing, I'm exposing the fact that I don't know. And really, I think what you're doing is actually leapfrogging past the mistakes of others. That everybody's gone through that kind of linear progression, and you can reinvent the wheel by trying to having to relearn something that somebody could have easily just given you the answer to, or you can go straight to the answer and maybe forge a new path of something new to learn and kind of hand that back when you have that experience. But I think asking for help is probably the biggest thing I'd say. It's just, there are so many solved problems. Like, let's go and solve the ones that don't already have an answer. Don't waste your time with the ones that do. So, yeah.
I would say don't try to over-optimize at the beginning. I think I felt a lot of pressure when I was leaving college because, up until then, there was a very fixed path. You finish high school, you finish college. And then I didn't really know what to do about when I got a new job. I was very overwhelmed with having to figure out, is this really going to put me on the right career path? And then I ended up doing things that were totally different anyway. And I think just don't try out different things and give yourself some space to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. And then I worked full time before I went back to grad school. And I think that really helped because I knew what I wanted to study because I had already explored some other areas. And I think that helped me a lot going forward and helped me focus where I spent my time as I got older.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky that we're in a field where it's changing so fast. It's so dynamic. You don't have to plan everything because new stuff is going to happen, and you go with the flow. You'll end up in exciting areas. At least that's been my experience. But yeah, that's good advice, Roshni. For me, my advice is take time to recharge yourself. I mean, there's always more to do and learn. That's what we love, but we have to also put limits on it. So just like you have professional goals, I think it's good to set personal goals about how much time you want to spend or goals for your health or things you want to achieve in your faith or your leisure time. And, when you're working, go hard and really concentrate on it, but take time away when you're not thinking about work if you can. And I definitely have some of my best ideas in the shower. So I'm not dogmatic about not thinking about work at home, but I think it's great to just clear your mind and have hobbies where you can build those soft skills too, because that's really important to influence people, to quickly form bonds with others. That's a really important part of being successful in tech.
I think this question is very interesting for me because I feel like I am someone who's starting out in tech. And so I think like a lot of the advice that has been said here is like super true. I think I've already felt it just, throughout like my internship experiences. I think for me, one of the biggest things has been like asking for help. I remember like a few years ago when I was facing like my first technical interview and I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to expect. And so what I did was I asked like one of the upperclassmen in my dorm to like help me mock interview, right? And it ended up making like a huge difference to me. It gave me like the confidence that I needed to go in and succeed. And I think, just ask for help. when you need to like talk to people who are older than you, learn from like, panels like this.
All excellent advice. Our next question is, how has your field changed in the past 5 years? What do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think in my field, I look at the code that the people who were working at our company 5 years ago wrote, and it was all like, none of it was machine learning based, and now everything is machine learning based. And so, and that just, as we have more data and we have better computers that can process all of the data, like everything is just going to move in that direction more. So it's a really obvious change that's happened. In the next 5 to 10 years, though, that's a lot harder. But I think it's hard to predict, and it goes along with what everybody has been saying, that you have to be ready to learn and pivot all the time. But I suspect it's going to go even further in that direction, where we have enormous amounts of data that we can just do whatever we want with, and it's going to be at your fingertips all the time, and just all this information always. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
For me in cybersecurity, I think it's been getting much more specialized. When I started out, you pretty much did everything. If you worked in cybersecurity, you looked at networks, you looked at hosts, you did reverse engineering, you understood encryption, and now all of those are becoming, to a certain extent, totally separate career fields. And I think that just speaks to the complexity of the attacks that are coming, and the complexity of the technology stack that we're defending. It's getting harder for people to know everything. And then privacy and data governance is getting a ton of attention, in the past 5 years, and I think that's going to continue to grow. And I think machine learning. I think in the next decade, we're going to be grappling with how to evaluate machine learning algorithms for equity. Are they doing what we want from a societal point of view? And also security. Can they be attacked? Can they be fooled? Can they be hacked? How do we trust that they're making the right decisions? I think that's going to be a big issue in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Angie and Roshni said. I think ethics is like starting to become like a really big question. Yeah, I mean, specifically like ethics in terms of data privacy, machine learning and bias in AI, I think are all like really important fields that are going to be addressed over the next few years. I think it's a little bit tricky for me to say how the field has changed, because I think like a few years ago I was in high school. But I mean, yeah, even just like seeing like how it's been changing, like what people are interested in, like in classes, like at conferences like this, I think has given like a lot of indication to those like couple points.
Yeah, and I'd say I think 5 years ago, gosh, it almost feels like the world was a bit different 5 years ago. You're almost kind of like, can I even remember back that far? There's been so many things that have changed since then. But I think that is the word, right? Change, right? Technology changes drastically, and it can be in a matter of a year. Like I remember starting off in Office 2010, and netbooks became a thing. So we've gone from these high-powered machines to, I basically want like a Raspberry Pi with like a screen, like, and then we went from that back to high-powered machines. And so I think that it's all under the umbrella of consumers want convenience, and we have to figure out the way to actually create that in a way that makes sense. And so I think convenience is going to be the word of the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's why we talk a lot about machine learning. I don't want settings. I don't want to have to kind of figure out and tell you how things should work. I just want them to work. And I think that is kind of what's powering all of that. It's just, give me convenience, make it easy, make it so simple I didn't have to do anything. And I think we have to figure out how to get there.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, what do you think is the best part of being a woman in the tech industry?
Everyone knows who you are because there aren't many women, and so everyone remembers, oh yeah, you were the girl in that class I took. And even professors, there were professors that I would see multiple years later. I had never gone to their office hours or anything, and it was like a 100% class, but they still remembered me because there weren't very many of us.
Yeah.
That's very glass half full. That's terrific. I think I'm really happy to have a career where I can support my family. So I have 3 kids, and my husband's a stay-at-home dad. He runs the whole house, especially, right now he's basically a first grade teacher because our youngest is in first grade. So and so I'm really grateful to have a career where I can support the family comfortably and just continue to learn and to know the technical details of things that are in the headlines. I love having that inside knowledge about what's going on there and being part of this industry that's really been driving so much of the change in our economy and in consumer devices and everything. It's been great to be part of that.
I think for me, in terms of the places I've been in industry so far, there's always been a very strong community of women in tech. And I've really enjoyed being a part of it and getting to hear about everyone's experiences, the good and the bad, and getting advice, making those connections and relationships that I hope will last for several years into my career in the future.
Yeah, I'd plus one that. I think there's just this implicit camaraderie that you have as a woman in tech. We know the challenges that we're facing, and I think we embrace and support each other really, really well. And I always cherish that. I mean, every company I've gone to, there's a really strong, women's group that, it's not just baking cookies as, people would think, but it's really having these deep, interesting conversations, but it's also familiar in that it's under the context of, I'm a woman in this company and this is a male dominated industry, but, wow, there's so much, it's almost like having a family. So I really love that.
Okay. Our next question is, what do you believe that young women need to know to consider technology as a career option?
I'd probably say it's rapidly changing. And so one of the best parts of technology is in some ways we become subject matter experts, but we're also generalists as well. Because you go deep and then something new happens and you go wide again. And then you go deep and then there's a new thing and then you go wide again. And so I think that part is really exciting. Never a dull moment, ever. There's always something new happening. And then I think you get a sense of, I guess, accomplishment from just launching that new thing or, seeing customers, use your products. I remember the first time I was working at Microsoft and I worked on Office, and then I saw somebody on a train using Word, and I'm like, oh my God, that's my features over there, buried 4 items deep in the menu, but it's there, and and so everything, it's just a rush, right? It's I could probably say hundreds of millions of people have touched my work, and I'm like, that's exciting. So I think if anything, you get that feeling and that rush, that makes it worth it alone.
Yeah, I agree. It's very satisfying to know that you are impacting people every day on a regular basis. And also along a similar vein, it's something that everybody can relate to a large extent. Everybody uses technology nowadays. You have to know how to use it, or you have to be exposed to it. And so everyone can appreciate to some level what you work on, which is really exciting.
So I was a freshman in college in 1990. And when I told my grandmother that I was going to major in computer science, she was a child of the Great Depression. She had seen tremendous change in her lifetime. And I thought she would be really excited because computer science, it was already kind of a buzzing field and people saw it as a wave of the future. but she was disappointed, and she told me I was making a big mistake and lasers were the future. Computers were a fad. So she told me I should just drop it. But, my grandma was a maker. She was the kind of person who was always crocheting and knitting and sewing. And, she worked long hours as a waitress for her family. But then she would come home and make all of these things. And I think that if she had been born, during this time, she would have gone into CS or engineering, because she just had that drive and energy to create new things. And so I think to tell young women that this is a tremendously creative field, and it's a place where you can build something and then see someone else interact with it, like Cassandra said, that's really exciting. And I think, we can translate that energy that girls have for making things and creating into CS, then I think we'll have more young women choose it as a field. So I think you don't have to love every aspect of CS, but if you find something that interests you, it'll continue to be fun.
Yeah, I think that's like one of my favorite things about tech or like computer science, really anything. It's just that you can do anything with like that knowledge that you attain over time. I think like one of the things that I had when I first like committed to computer science, I think one of the things I thought was like, oh, I have to go be a software engineer now. That's not necessarily true, right? Like you can go and do anything. You can even completely change fields if you really wanted to. It's just like that like experiences that you get when you go and go into tech are just so transferable to so many different things.
All right. Our last question before we open it up to the audience is, have you had any role models in your career journey, and how did they influence you? Who do you turn to for advice, for inspiration?
For me, when I started in this group at Waymo, it's the first time in my entire career that I've had a woman as my manager. My managers, my research advisors, even the vast majority of my professors, they've all been men. And so it was really cool for a change. And it also, the transition happened at a time I was pregnant with my first kid, and my manager had 2 young kids also. And it felt like she could really relate to everything I was going through. And I thought that made a huge difference in making me feel really comfortable and welcome on the team. And so she's been a really good role model, because I see myself and I'm like, or I see her and I'm like, okay, that's what I want my career to look like in 2 years, or in I guess more like 4 years. But I think she's been somebody who's been really inspiring, because she works really hard. Everyone takes her really seriously, and she's still a great mom. And so that's cool.
Yeah, I think for me, like I don't really have like one role model per se. I think for me, it's been more of like a series of advisors and mentors and like previous managers that have all like given me like really important pieces of advice, or like I've been able to like sustain like relationships with like for longer times. So like for example, like even now, like I'm talking with like a previous manager that I had like a couple of years ago to just talk about like to catch up and talk about like full-time roles like at different places. And so yeah, I think it's just like being able to like learn from like many different people has been like really important for me, and just continuing to like make those connections.
Yeah, I'd plus one that. I wouldn't say it's necessarily been one role model. I think there have been pieces of many people that have inspired me. And so I think, you look at kind of, this one person has a ton of confidence and they exude that, and this other person is really great at asking questions and kind of getting down to like the crux of the problem. And then maybe this other person is really good at bringing everybody together under a common goal. And so I see those pieces, and I don't know if maybe I kind of create this, ideal person out of those pieces of people, but I kind of just see those things, and each one of those is inspiring. And it's like, yes, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to do that. So I think it's just many parts of many people.
For me, growing up, my uncle worked in the computer industry. He worked for Cray supercomputers in the 80s, when it was really rare for anyone, at least he was the only person I knew worked in computer science. And I think that knowing someone in the field, even though there was nobody in Florida where I grew up who worked in CS, that gave me the confidence to think that there was a career there. And I think it's really important right now for communities that don't have a lot of people working in technology to try to mentor and give more of a step up in those communities where they can see themselves in these kind of jobs. So that's something that I've been trying to spend more time on, and it's something that Morgan Stanley is really good about, giving back and helping people come into the field. That's important to me.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So audience members, you can drop any of your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring it. Give them a couple minutes, hopefully, if they have any, to type out their questions.
While they're typing questions, I have a question for Roshni. You asked before if when I became a mom that I felt like I was put into more nurturing and roles. And I wanted to ask you if that's been your experience.
I don't think it's been my experience about the nurturing necessarily, but I do think that people make assumptions about, oh, you must be really busy with kids, especially now that we're working from home. Everyone's like, oh, well, you have to take care of your kids and do work, so let me go ask somebody else to do this new project that's coming up. And that's frustrating because I will make time. If it's a cool project, I'll make time for it. And it's also not all about how many hours you work, but how productively you work in those hours, right? And so there are things that I can do, but I sometimes feel like I'm not the first choice because people assume that I'm too busy. It's just disappointing.
Yeah, I think this pandemic has been a crisis for a lot of moms. And I think for dads too, but I guess, our society does still expect moms to do that more. And I do find that my kids expect moms to do more. They're too socialized.
Yeah, and our family actually, sorry, speaking of being a mom, yeah.
Should we feed her milk? Like drink her milk? Or
it's okay. It's okay. You can just put her down. Or yeah, if you want, if she seems like she'd want it, you can. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, in our family, my husband is very involved, and we split the day. He has the kids for as many hours as I do, but I think people have adjusted their expectations for how much I will produce, but not as much for him because everyone else in his office thinks, oh, you probably have a wife who's doing most of the work. And so that actually creates a lot of stress for him because he feels like he's not keeping up with everybody else's expectations of him.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've actually really enjoyed about the pandemic, about, I guess, the working from home aspect and all the video conferencing is it's not just women that you're seeing holding an infant and talking to you. Or, I had one coworker, male, he's like, I have to turn my camera off because my baby just threw up all over my shirt. Or I see the, inevitable meeting where someone's holding a cell phone and then holding the baby like a football, and they're kind of just walking around talking while trying to keep the baby from crying. And so I see that with both mothers and fathers, and I think it's refreshing. I mean, it's cute to just have, cute babies in a conversation. I mean, that just kind of helps with like the meeting in general, but also to see that people are sharing these roles and, we're doing the best we can. And I think humanizes it a lot as well. So I've been actually really enjoying that aspect.
All right. Also, I think we have some questions in the chat. Megan asks, what are the best and worst job decisions you've made?
Can you just repeat the question?
Yes, sorry. So Megan asks, what are the best and worst job decisions you have made?
I can probably kind of jump in. I think the best job decision is to decide on a role or a position based on my level of excitement about the work and the people there, and based on how the company treats its employees and things like that. And so I think a lot of times, sometimes we're looking at money, or sometimes we're looking at like, ooh, it's a really cool, project and things like that. And there are a million cool projects, but the project becomes less cool if you don't have the environment to really support it. And so I think the absolute best is always going to be like, do you feel supported? Do you feel like this company, like you can come up with an idea and, you know, it can take it and run with it, because that's how innovation happens, versus, well, they pay a lot of money and it's a good buzzword to put on my resume. Like, that's maybe not the right decision matrix, at least I know for me.
I think kind of related is being able to know that, or being able to acknowledge that I've made a bad decision. Like if you join a team and it's not really working out, you don't have to stick with it for 3 years because you think it's going to get better, but just being able to say, nope, it's time to move on. That's valuable. And you're so much happier when you do. So that's been, I guess, best moments after the worst ones.
I think for me, actually, going to grad school right after undergrad was, I think, a mistake for me. I wasn't, I just did it because I knew how to do school and I didn't know how to do job. So, so I just wanted to keep doing school. And I wasn't really emotionally prepared for the difficulty and the isolation of that. And my mental health got to kind of dangerous levels. And so it was all fine and it worked out okay in the end. And I learned a tremendous amount, and there's fantastic people there at Berkeley. But I think if I had waited a little while and had more maturity and more of a support network, it would have been less painful for me.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of similar, like my decision so like last summer I had this kind of huge crisis about whether to do like an extra year as an MEng or not. And I ended up deciding to do it. And I actually think that it was, on the contrary, very good for me, because I feel like I needed the extra year to go and learn more things about the field, as well as just take time to like, rest and like grow as an individual. I think right now I'm kind of in this position where I am going to be making like a pretty big job decision very soon, because I'm applying for jobs right now. And I think right now the things that I'm like going through is like deciding like what's important to me in terms of things like location, like the mission, work environment, and trying to balance all those different things in order to like make a decision that I think is going to be best for me.
All right, that kind of feeds into our next audience question, which is, what were some pivotal moments, both positive and negative, that may have caused you to switch directions in your career?
I'll start. So when I was in undergrad, I did a lot of undergraduate research, and I really enjoyed that. And then I went to grad school and I got a PhD, and then I went to the National Security Agency and did research. So everything was very focused on expertise in a narrow area and contributing something new to the field. And then I eventually sort of accidentally ended up taking jobs in other areas that were not based in my area of expertise. And I discovered the joy of breadth. So I found that I'm really not cut out to be a researcher after all, bless the people who are, but I really enjoy knowing an inch deep about a mile wide. And so I've really had a lot of fun working in all different areas in cybersecurity. And I think the reason that happened to me was I decided to take a visiting professor position, which I thought was furthering this goal of specializing and trying out the academic life. But I found that I love teaching the entry-level classes and teaching classes in all different areas. And that sort of gave me that breadth to go back and do all different kinds of jobs at the National Security Agency. So I think just being alive to those possibilities, even if you've been doing, I had invested 10 or more years in that depth, but I'm so happy that I ended up going the breadth route instead.
Yeah, I think for me, go for it. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I think like for me, like something that happened very recently was So I think prior to like maybe like around this year, I had always like very prioritized like stability or like location, stuff like that in terms of like where I think I would like end up like for a full-time job. But I think something that had changed in the past year was like getting sent home from college because of the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the aftermath of that, and just seeing kind of like all the like bad things that started happening, like the inequity in society. And going through that, I think kind of made me reevaluate my priorities, I guess, in terms of like, I think right now, like, although those previous things are very like important to me still, I think one of the things that has become very important is in terms of like the kind of work that I'm doing and the impact I'm leaving on like my communities. And kind of like having to like factor that in now in terms of like my decisions moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say I think for me, decisions are always driven by how much can I learn. So kind of going back on Angela's point of like, I think as a technical product manager, I very much am, you become a bit of a generalist and you are a bit of a jack of all trades, and maybe, I don't know if you ever really master anything because, you know, you have that opportunity to go in and you know, I dove deep into gaming consoles, and then I jumped into ad platforms, and then I am working on, you know, enterprise software. Right now I'm helping people find dinner at OpenTable. And so you kind of jump around. There's still the underlying set of skills that you need to just, you know, be able to kind of jump in, ramp up, and, you know, start to build things. But that notion of learning, like, I think the pivots are exciting. And that's one of the, kind of go back to that question of, you know, what's great about being in technology? I can do that. If I wanted to go into VR next year, I'm pretty confident I could jump over into that and just pick it up and learn it, just by nature of that's how tech works. And that's what they expect, right? And so I think that's probably like the best set of moves you can make, is to find what interests you. And there's nothing like working on a product that you use every day. When I worked on Prime Video, I think the most satisfying thing is to see a bug in production. I'm like, that's going to be fixed tomorrow. And know that you can actually go and make that happen. So I think during that time frame, half of the photos on my phone were of my TV screen. Like, there's a bug here, there's a bug there, we're going to fix that. But it's just, it's a great thing to be able to do.
I think for me, like, biggest moments were when I started doing something and I realized that I didn't actually like it as much as I thought I would. When I went, or not that I didn't like it, but basically when I went to work after college, I realized I really missed school, and I wanted to dive deep into a technical problem. And when you're working at a company, it's a lot more driven by the customers and not just what seems interesting. And so I made a big shift and I went to grad school. And there I experienced exactly what Angie was talking about, where it's really isolating when you're in grad school. And after a while, I realized I didn't want to be in academia, because the whole point of academia is to do something that nobody else is doing. And that gets really lonely after a while. And so then I went back to industry, but I picked a job where I knew I would be able to focus more deeply on what I was interested in. And so I think, yeah, those kinds of moments after trying something out and realizing it's not exactly what I expected have been the biggest moments to help me figure out the path forward.
All right. Our next audience question is, what's the advice that you would give for bridging the transition from school and academia to industry?
Well, I'll just jump in, and this is advice that also applies, I think, to going to grad school, is if you find yourself feeling isolated and feeling depressed, you know, get professional help and don't wait until things are really extreme. I think people are younger people maybe are more aware of mental health than when I was coming up. But I think it's really good to just have someone you can talk to, keep a journal, think about your feelings, think about whether they're coming from just not having enough exercise or not having enough social interaction, and just try to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I'd add to that and say, academia and being in the workforce and industry are two very different worlds. And I think that you you're not going through it alone, and everything you're experiencing is something that somebody else has experienced and can help you with. And so it goes back to that, piece of advice on asking for help. Finding groups of people. There's always a group of the new kids on the block that you can go and say, oh my gosh, are you going through imposter syndrome? Or I don't know where the snacks are. Or like, I think I was talking to one group of friends and I was like, does anybody else still have that dream of your homework to do in the morning and you forgot? And I had that for years. And to be able to hear that so are other people, I'm like, oh, okay, good, I'm not crazy. But there are other people that are in that same position and going through the same things, and it's good to surround yourself by a community of like-minded people.
I think a big thing is just, it is very different. And I think part of it is, I think, again, maybe it doesn't matter as much if you go to grad school or work in industry, but basically after college, that's when the path is not as clear. And I think just being ready for that and acknowledging that there are a lot of things you can do, and a lot of those things will be very, very different from everything you've done before. Like, you're not walking to class every day. You don't live in the building with 300 other people that are the same age as you, and it's different, but it's exciting too. And I think just being ready, acknowledging that it's going to be really different is important. So you don't end up in a situation where your life isn't quite meeting your expectations, and you end up not liking it because of that.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about things that start getting really different, because I think, at least for me, like, I had just graduated, so I have seen like a lot of my friends go into like very different places in the world, like careers, and it's a weird transition for me, at least right now, because I'm still kind of in school, whereas like a lot of my friends are like out in the world. And so I think like the transition also, I don't know if there's like anything I can really add to this. I think it's something that I'm actually personally still going through. But I just want to like echo like everything that the other panelists said, especially with like, sometimes like your path will take you to like very different places, and that's okay. I guess you will get to where you are meant to be.
I think when you're an undergrad too, you have assignments. They're due on a certain day. You get a grade and it's done, and you have a sense of closure. But when you're working, everything could always be improved on. Sometimes you have a date when you have to stop working on it, but a lot of times you just keep living with that project. So just accepting that you have to be happy with what you can get done, and not expecting perfection.
And I think another thing that the assignment comment made me think of is like, if you don't want to do one of your assignments, you don't have to do it, and you might get a bad grade, but it only affects you. And then when you go to work, if you slack off, it can affect a lot of other people and a lot of other projects. And so that's pressure, but it also makes your work feel a lot more meaningful, because you feel like a lot of people need what you're working on, and it's exciting. And I think when I went back to school, that was something I missed, because again, like, if I didn't do my work, I just would graduate a year later. But it wasn't like people were really excited to get what I was giving them.
All right, and with that, I think we have come to the end of this panel. I would like to thank all of the lovely panelists here for coming and taking the time to be here. I'd also like to thank the members of the audience. Thank you for watching the panel. Please stick around for the next panel, which is Life After Undergrad. And with that, are there any final thoughts you guys would like to share before we end?
I think there's lots of... Yes, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.